I want to apologize to anyone who's here for me not showing up to the last meeting. I was working a night shift. I quit my job. So. Out cold.
Okay, you're all set.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 1st meeting of the Village of New Paltz Planning Board. Tonight, we have some administrative business to come to first, followed by our general public comment. We will then be doing just a few quick decisions that we have, and then we will move on to our public hearing section, followed by some other new applications. So to start out, did everyone get a chance to review the March 4th meeting minutes, and were there any changes or corrections?
Yes.
All right, in that case, could I get a motion to approve the March 4th meeting minutes? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Next up, were there any updates from our village board and county planning board liaison? Doesn't look
I
like.
think he has a fire department meeting tonight.
Were there any updates from the director of planning, zoning, and code enforcement?
Just one, and it's later on the agenda, is we have a referral from the village board for local law amendment to subdivision, and so I can explain that a little bit more when we get to that section, but that's the only update.
And were there any updates from the town plan board?
I looked at their last agenda. They had 3 applications, a sign update for the Sunoco gas station on Main Street. They had a wetlands permit, and they had a lot line adjustment. And that was the bulk of their meeting.
Members of the planning board.
Both environmental meetings, I think, to our next week.
Well, in that case, maybe we should talk about these 2 local laws that you.
It's just one. The second link was to the EAF that goes with it. So there's a copy of the local law. This was something I put together. Emily and I had talked about it a while ago. I had spoken with the mayor about it. What this will do is it will currently lot line adjustments where you're either merging 2 lots or starting with a certain number of lots and only changing internal lines, ending with the same number of lots, is required under our code to be treated as a subdivision. Requires a public hearing. In the time that I've been here in the year, well, almost a year now, we've had 5 or 6 of these. We've never had a public comment. I went back and looked through. There were almost never public comments on any of them. Many communities treat these as a certification rather than reviewing it as a subdivision. So it will still come to this board. What you would do is you would review it. You would verify that it meets the village's codes of setbacks and density. You would then, instead of approving it and holding a public hearing and approving it as you would a subdivision, you certify that what is proposed meets the code. It's not really a subdivision because it's not creating any more lots. So to be a lot line adjustment, you must start with and end with either the same number of lots or less lots. And then there's a statement that is put in sort of full disclosure. This was a law that I was involved with the town of Rochester, where I used to be, and we found it to be very successful. So I proposed it to the village board. They think it's a great idea. They're holding a public hearing next Wednesday on the 9th on this. They won't be able to adopt it that night because they had to circulate it to other communities and the county planning board, but they do plan to consider whether to adopt or not at the meeting on the 23rd of April. But part of any land use laws are required to be referred to this board for any comments. So if this board wants to make comments, if your answer is simply, we have no comments to make, you can either make that or you can just say, just do nothing. So that's if anybody has any questions. Oh, the second part is what's called a natural subdivision. I don't know that we have any properties in the village that this would apply to. That would be where a public roadway divides a property into two pieces, but it's all one lot. And that would allow the person to apply to make it two lots because the road dividing their property is essentially making it two plots. So that's the other piece. I included it, but as I said, I didn't really do a deep dive to see if we have any properties that it would actually cover. So,
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I'm in full support of this. There any other comments from the board? We should relay to the village.
You may have said this, Mike, but if there's any consideration in the lot line revision that might make one or either of the lots for some reason out of compliance, who does that review that makes it something we don't have to review?
that couldn't happen. So if that would be reviewed by first to get to the agenda here, it's still reviewed by the code enforcement officer. It's not something that the public can just bring directly to this board. So he would do the initial determination. You can have a situation where a lot is non-conforming, and if the lot line adjustment makes it more conforming, less non-conforming, then that's a good thing. So sometimes those might come to the board, but if they're conforming and they become non-conforming as a result of this, it would never get to this board.
I think that we could just give our comment that we're in support of it.
In support. Happy to do that. Thank you.
Next, we have public comment. Is anyone here tonight that would like to make a general public comment not related to the two public hearings we have later on? Yes. Please.
CB 2407.
Okay, that would be our public hearing that's coming up in a little while. Yeah, correct. Any other general public comments?
There's 3 people that signed up, but if you're speaking on one of the public hearings, you wouldn't be speaking at the general. So, Leonard?
I'm going to speak at the public hearing.
On the, okay, and Rusty,
Yeah, I might say something, I'll see.
okay, and then Gary. Okay, yep.
Okay.
So. Yeah, apologies, there's 3 different signups because there's 3 different public comment meetings, so. Okay, so it appears there's nobody. I don't know if there's anybody online.
Is there anyone online like the general public? In that case, I'd like to move on to our first decision for tonight, 2501. It's 30 and 32 Clifford Street. Please come up.
They're online. Elizabeth, if you want to unmute yourself and feel free, if you want to turn your camera on, please do.
Okay.
Could you just tell us about the ZBA decision and any of the changes you made to the site plan since you were last before us?
Sure. The ZBA gave us an approval for a 3-foot variance and a specific slope of the south-facing roof for solar efficiency. And so we redesigned the elevations according to that, resubmitted those. And so the new elevations you'll see are consistent with that. And that was approved and signed off. Mike, any other update that makes sense? Did I capture everything?
No, you did. So for the board, there's a copy of the zoning board decision in your packet there. The applicant had originally asked for a 5-foot height variance. The ZBA in their discussion and review ruled that a 3-foot would achieve what they were trying to achieve. So they lowered it to from the 5-foot requested to a 3-foot maximum. And they also put a maximum pitch of the roof in the decision. It's one of the conditions. I apologize, I don't remember the pitch, but it's included in the
7/12.
7/12. So,
Yeah, I mean,
and they submitted new drawings that reflected that.
I think those. Fine, see. Small. Were there any other questions about the changes in the variance?
The neighbors were here at the last meeting and they said they were okay with it.
That's
Fine.
And you received the resolution, draft resolution, and we're able to do that. Okay. So there were no specific conditions involved in this resolution. So if there's no other questions, I'd like to get a motion to approve PB 2501. 32 Cooper Street. Second. And could we have a, yes, we have the.
It's in your packet. There.
Conditions, yeah. So could we have a roll call vote for this?
Sure. Rachel,
Aye.
Nikki,
Aye.
Rich,
Aye.
Carrie,
Aye.
Zach. Okay. Motion is carried.
Done that, and we'll get that signed to you shortly.
Great, thank you.
Next we have PD 2505, 11 Marsh Street.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's present, but I had told him that, you know, that if he wasn't able to be here, the decision would still be considered, so.
And could you just give us an update on the Alter County Planning Board response?
Yeah, they came back with a no county impact.
And I see that there was also a change to the sewer mitigation fee, so that was added to the resolution as well.
Yeah, Emily can probably describe it better than I. It was a clarification of an agreement that was made between the developer and the village board, so.
Yeah, it's in the specific conditions number 2. So previously the developers had offered a $50,000 payment and support of sewer system improvement, and that's changed to $60,000 the first year and $10,000 for 9 additional years.
Okay. So standard resolution, but there are 2 specific conditions that we'll just quickly go through before we vote. So number one, accept the relocation of the 2 electric vehicle charging stations and adjustments to the lighting plan shown in the site plan referenced above. Plans and approvals contained in applications PB 22-10 and 24-13 remain in force. And number 2, all the conditions of the previous approval for applications PB 22-10 and PB 24-13 are incorporated herein by reference and remain in full force with one exception. Specific condition number 8 stated that the applicant will make a mitigation payment of $50,000 for sewer system improvements. Mitigation payment is going to increase to $60,000 for the first year and $10,000 per year for the following 9 years. So with that, I'd like to get a motion to approve the resolution approval for PB 2505 11 Water Street. Second. And could we have another roll call vote for this, please?
Sure. Rachel,
Aye.
Nikki,
Aye.
Rich,
Aye.
Terry,
Aye.
Zach.
So now moving on to our first public hearing. Can I get a motion to open the public hearing for PD 2407, 147, 149, and 151 North Chestnut Street?
So.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We have 3 people signed up, and I believe we probably have some other names that may have intended to sign up. So the first name signed up is Andy Fay.
Project. I am a resident in the neighborhood there on North Chestnut, and I live with project. I also pastor the Nazarene Church that's right across the street from the BOCES building. So I have a vested interest on 2 fronts with this. And I just was kind of watching some of the Zoom live streams from previous meetings, and actually on the February 22nd, when I think this was first brought up and discussed, or the most recent one. And I guess I just had 3 kind of clarification questions and 1 more timing, I guess, to consider. I wondered, I know part of the project is to provide retail space in that stretch, and I wanted to see just considering many of the retail spaces around the village and town that are empty at this point, wondered if there was any consideration to try to work on filling those spaces, and what the village is, where the village is at with that process. Not that that's your responsibility.
So we will be discussing this more later in the application review section, so we can address, each of these questions.
Okay, and maybe all these would fall under that. Just considering, with what we've experienced this year with the bike and sidewalk project on Henry Du Bois, wondered who might be responsible if this project goes through, who's responsible for maintenance and snow removal, like on the sidewalks along North Chestnut. Is that something for later as well? Okay. So I guess one concern, and kind of reflected in some of Rich's comments from the February meeting, just thinking about that corridor on North Chestnut where there's one building, as you know, going up right now. I understand there's another approval down the street a bit next to Zero Place. Are there 3 or 4 new structures that are being considered in that stretch right now? Just 3. The 3, okay. So thinking about, I think Rich, you mentioned like what's the breaking point, in this process of these new constructions, new buildings going in, and just wondered, I've tried to review some of the information that's online, the environmental impact studies and traffic studies and some of those things that are available. And I think, there's kind of a sense where on paper it looks one way and we, kind of can plan for that. But when it comes to real life, as we all know, sometimes those things pan out that way and sometimes they don't. And just wondered if there would be consideration for, just sort of seeing once this project that's going up right now, is completed, just seeing what the actual real effects are in the community and that corridor in North Chestnut, before another project that's, probably 2 or 3 times that size would be approved, going forward. Just in some of the effects to that area of town, that neighborhood. Thank you, that was my. Okay.
Mr. Clay, was that, did you submit these comments as well? I thought I saw something like that.
I did send an email maybe a month ago, yeah.
Yeah, that is included.
Yep.
That email was included before the original public hearing.
Some of those questions were answered.
And just, and the public hearing is meant for you to share. We don't ever have a dialogue in this case.
Oh, okay.
We're avoiding responding to your.
Sure. Right, okay. So those other questions would be more for, the next.
Yeah, we'll be talking with the applicants that come up here and we can address a whole lot of what.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, the next person signed up is Samuel Niffen.
May I push mine to the end?
Absolutely. Peter Campbell.
I'm not very familiar with this process, so it's a good opportunity to come and speak. But I just wanted to mention, since I think we've done the same corridor as the previous person speaking, my main concerns with the current projects and the amount of traffic that's currently on Route 32. I consider it Route 32, where you guys refer to it as Chestnut Street. Well, it's very heavily traveled. The police department is there every single day. It's not pickable all the time because of the speed. It butts up to almost into the town of New Falls. The property gets close. The only green space that's left there is the current property that we're talking about. Everything else is now going to be paved over. We have OCs, you have the Methodist Church, you have the current projects that's going on. And at Sunset Ridge, if anybody takes the opportunity to take a look at the guardrail where the runoff has now started feeding into 32. And further up into the town where there's another guardrail, the water, the runoff is also damaged. That entire guardrail is falling into the ditch. Because what's happening is that the water is no place to go without development. But everything that's happened in the town is in addition to the village. So that with development on Hall Road and so on and so forth, there's an awful lot of water, which actually comes over Ann Street along 32 for culverts can handle it. There's also a hole in one of the culverts was underneath 32, just between the village and the penalty box. If you go along the guardrail, you can actually look down and see the hole. So somebody needs to have a discussion between the town and village and the state of New York because of the road. Because with snow removal, runoff, because that's like I said before, that's the only green space we have there. So in addition to that, I also wanted to just put it out there in general, because that we really need to have the village and the state to look at speed along that corridor. Because we're going to be adding more traffic because of this development. I'm not opposed to development. I just think that we need to look at that. Maybe taking the speed limit all the way out to the national right. Possibly double line in it the whole way up, because people get very impatient what happens, to people like me, myself, and maybe some other people, is that when you're trying to turn into your driveway, you get honked at. And people actually give you, hand gestures. So I just wanted to put out there that I think that some cooperation between the village and the town and state and government might need to happen. So that's my chance. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person signed up, Leonard Moza.
Good evening. My name is Leonard Loza. I live in the village of New Paltz on North Oakland Terrace. I've got 5 points here that I'd like to speak to you about with regard to the project before you. As you remember, perhaps when ShopRite came in, you can only make a right-hand turn to stay with the flow of traffic. Stewart's was asked to put in a traffic light to maintain the safety and the flow of the traffic. These large projects are going to have a lot of people, especially in the early mornings when they're going to go to work. My suggestion, speak to the state. The people at Montague Drive, when they come down, are concerned about the traffic traveling in that direction. My recommendation is a traffic light. The second item I'd like to talk about is the volume of sewage that's going to be generated. I'm hoping that the calculations have been done. That can be presented to the village so that we do not get fined for dumping raw effluent into the Walk-Hill, as we have been fined many times in the past. I'm hoping also the parking lots, we have a zero runoff law in the village. I'm hoping more than anything that there will be an oil water separator there so that the oil stays here, and as the water is discharged into the Walk-Hill, it does not contain any oil products. My concern when I look at the building being constructed right now on the former Agway property is its proximity to the road. There doesn't, and I haven't seen any safety barriers in place other than the jumping the sidewalk to prevent a car from crashing into that building at any point in time. You may have noticed that they have poles in front of a lot of buildings so that the cars can't hit any of the pedestrians. So that's a consideration. From the drawing that I saw, from the distance of the edge of the road to the building where the sidewalk is and the greenery is, it just doesn't all fit. Okay. The last thing, the NBR zoning code, which encourages mixed use, can increase housing in ways that are consistent with the character of our community. The facades that I've seen of the buildings being put up, they look like dormitories. You have the power to ask for some appropriate structures to make those buildings so when someone goes down the road, it doesn't look like a dormitory. Thank you.
The next person is Rusty Staub.
Okay.
Okay. So now, Samuel, we're back to you.
I'm on the wrong sheet then, or?
What was the name?
Jason.
Oh, yeah, you're signed up on the other one. We'll get you after. Sorry.
He really wants to be last.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you were signed up on the next public hearing. Yeah.
So I think continuing to make these developments here is bad. I think it's fundamentally going to alter the character of the community of New Paltz. I've lived here my entire life. And someone I know showed me an image of these proposed developments. I'm not on Facebook, but they look hideous to me. I've experienced working in old buildings, specifically in Kingston, and they're very nice looking. I don't know why we, have to put ugly buildings in our community. I don't think that's good. I think it's detrimental to everyone here. And I also agree with everyone else that's going to impede traffic, which is already bad enough. And, additionally, I think it's going to increase the cost of living for everyone. The more development we have, I think is gonna just make things more expensive, which has seemed, it's a trend that's continuing here. And I don't wanna have to leave the community I grew up in and my family's from, but it's looking pretty bleak for young people to continue living here. And that's all I really have to say. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, so Jason, we'll get you next. That's quite all right.
Put my glasses on before.
That's okay.
So good evening, I'm Jason Taylor, I live on Huguenot Street, my lot backs up to right at the dividing line between the Agway project and this project. So these things are literally in my backyard, but I'm actually a fan of and a proponent of the MDR zoning, and I think that the idea of building, increasing density, solving the housing shortage of these kind of buildings, mixed use, in favor of that, and in favor of this project in general. I like to think the design actually is pretty good. I like the way the courtyard leads into the rail trail. I think there's a lot to recommend it. But there are a couple of points that I typed up before the last meeting, and you guys have probably done some briefs in reviewing that. But one thing is that I think as we try and address the housing situation, it would be great if these new buildings as they come online do offer a mix of housing opportunities for families with children. We've got issues with the school district, losing kids, et cetera. And so a design like this that has such a preponderance of studios and one bedrooms, out of 128 units, there's only 30 two-bedroom units. And so if you want to make this be something that can accommodate families in the area to address what we all agree is a housing shortage, then that's something to address. Another thing that I also think is important, given the way that the Empire State Trail backs up all of these developments and how much the zoning code wants to encourage pedestrian and bicycle use of that corridor. I think the language in the code that talks about screening parking areas from the street should rightly be applied to screening parking areas from the rail trail as well. And so I think that requiring some kind of berm or other kind of opaque visual block between the users of the Hudson of the Empire State Trail and the parking areas, which are for all of these buildings going to be considerable, would be helpful to block the cars and also, their headlights for those of us next door. And then the most significant thing, I did spend a good amount of time both reading the code and looking over these plans in some detail. And I think that it would be good if the board would take another look at the parking calculation summaries that were submitted with this application, because the applicant is claiming this 20% reduction in required spaces based on language in the code that talks about the different time of use. So the code seems to me to be conceived to say, okay, if you've got ground floor non-residential and 2 floors of residential above, then you can say that the people who live there are going to go to work when the people are coming into the businesses. So that's their shared use. In other words, one parking space can serve 2 purposes in space. So the code sort of is imagining, I think, that 1/3 of your square footage, the ground floor, is commercial. And so it says, well, okay, let's reduce the parking requirement by 1/5, by 20%, saying that should give you some wiggle room. But what the code doesn't seem to accommodate to me is a building like this where they have asked for a special use permit to actually put 31 residential units on that ground floor and only 6 little retail spaces in front. And they're still claiming a full 20% reduction in parking requirements, as if the entire ground floor was non-residential. And so that gives you a calculation that just doesn't really make sense. If you say you've got 128 units, and again, this is for that studios and 1 bedrooms, which only have 1.1 spaces per unit. You load up the whole project with those, then your multiplier is low. Anyway, so it seems to me that it makes sense to think about just in terms of, because again, I want us to have more housing, but I want the village to grow in a way that's sustainable and appropriate and doesn't put too many constraints on the resources in the ways that the people are talking about. Seems to me it's reasonable to think, okay, what percentage of occupants in a building like this could be leased to tenants with a second car? Because some of the 1 bedrooms are going to be couples with 2 cars and jobs, right? Maybe even some of the studios. So if you look at the way they've allocated parking spaces here versus the Agway next door,
The island next door is set up so that as many as 47% of apartments could be leased to someone with a second car. And this project, if you don't count the street parking, the parallel parking on 32, the so-called land bank spaces and the ADA accessible spaces, there are actually fewer parking spaces than there are units. So I just don't think it adds up. And I mean, I'm all in favor of having a more walkable community and people taking bikes and stuff, but this building is almost a mile away from Main Street. It's not realistic to imagine that our walkable corridor is going to extend all the way up there in the short term. So it just seems to me that the parking calculations in the site plan as is now are just not nearly generous enough for what I think is going to be the actual use of it, which means that if it goes forward like this, you're going to have people filling up the BOCES slots who are living in this place next door. And in the wintertime, the county's going to be trying to do snow removal. There'll be all this. I mean, I think the board should look at these parking calculations again and try and consider them. And I think probably the answer is to reduce the number of units so that there is enough square footage of parking area to have enough spaces for a reasonable number of what the tenants are going to use. And then my last point, just a minor point, but I think maybe the time your new board will get involved in this. When we've got a large amount of rooftop space on the third floor of a building like this, I'd like the board to be really sensitive to the lighting up there. Because if you've got lighting that is outward facing and you're already on the third floor of the building out there, then that's where everyone in the neighborhood would be like there's a lighting district. Thank you very much.
There were two people who signed up for the 8183 North Chestnut, the next public hearing. The one I can't read the writing. I'm not sure. Did you want to speak about this project or the next one?
This,
Okay, we'll take you next. And if you could just say your name, apologize.
Sure, it's Abby Green.
Okay, that one I could read. There's another name signed up that I can't read. So,
thank, well, and I think everybody has already said what most of my issues are, but just to reiterate, my biggest issue is really the scale of the project and whether it really is going to change the character of the community. And by community, I don't just mean the surrounding area. And by the way, my neighbor Jason, so it backs up to me as well from Huguenot Street. And that's fine, but given the scale of this project, I think we're looking at something that is really new and different. You look at apartments that already exist, you look at Zero Place. This is 3 times the size of Zero Place, which really makes it the first of its kind as a structure. So I think, is this the direction that we want to go in? Or do we want to fulfill the need for housing with smaller and, smaller projects, maybe have more projects that have been be scaled down to a smaller size, so that you're not seeing this giant eyesore. I think somebody prior to me described it as a giant dormitory, and that's what I was saying at home when I was looking at the drawing also. So it's not just one person who thinks that way. It looks, it doesn't look neighborhoody. It doesn't look, it's very grand, but I'm not sure it really fits into the community. So that was my biggest reaction to the whole project. Also traffic, and that's because I complain about traffic all the time. And I'm not sure I know how the traffic issue could be solved because new housing is going to bring new cars, but I think it's something really important to focus in on. Other people have mentioned lights and other things, but I think that's a huge issue, not just in terms of parking, as Jason had noted, but in terms of just getting around from one place to another. So that's another concern. Somebody had mentioned sewer. I'm sure all of that's been looked into, but it is a concern because we want to make sure that the village can handle all of this. My last issue is really just a question for me having to do with affordable housing. We all know what happened now with Zero Place. It's being turned into condominiums. The owners or the developers have said the people who are in affordable housing can stay there. But I've looked at the law, maybe I didn't read the fine print, but I didn't see anything that said it had to be that way. Right? So at some point, we're letting developers develop. In this case, it would be a massive scale development with the understanding some of it will be put aside for affordable housing, which is also really necessary in the community as well as housing. If at some point this were to go condo, let's say, what would happen? We don't know. We don't even know what's going to happen at Zero Place because once the owner management takes over, maybe they'll have a different view about the units that are affordable housing. So that's a little bit of a concern too. I think those dots need to be connected in some way so that if you're letting somebody develop, sure, there's an owner, but if you can turn it into a condominium, it doesn't really, to my mind at least, provide the protections for affordable housing that were the contingent upon being able to develop in the first place. So I just wanted to raise it. Thank you very much. And thank you.
There anyone else here in person?
Yeah, there is one other name, and I apologize, I can't read the handwriting. It's very faint. So
Graham Wood. Yeah.
that may be it. Well, you do want to speak on this project? or the
Yes,
other?
actually, it's, said my question.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So that's all I have signed up. I don't know if there's a number of people online, and I don't know if anyone else.
Is there anyone online that would like to make a public comment on PB 2407? I think Kitty Brown has her hand raised. Yes.
Hi there. Ready for me?
Yes.
Just FYI, those of us who are listening in can hear Mike, and we can sort of hear the person who is speaking. We're having a hard time hearing the actual planning board members, so maybe you can move the owl a little bit closer to you.
It's actually on the table right in front of them. You just hear me because I'm very loud.
Okay, well, they're very quiet. First of all, I was a big supporter of Zero Place before this planning board. I was thrilled when the village passed the NBR. And I'm glad to see that we are making a dent in the need for affordable housing. I have some comments about traffic, as everybody else does. My main one is that the study goes as far south as the Moriello Apartments and as far east as Trans Hudson. And I would request that it go as far north as Clearwater. That, we have the Highway Department, Ulster County Resource, Town Hall, baseball, BMX, a ton of traffic goes in and out of there. And so people will be going to that destination, coming back to their apartments. And I think it would be important for us to understand how much traffic north of these units is going to be generated. And then if we can go all the way down, Shivertown is notorious for accidents. We have a couple every year. We have the flashing lights, but people still collide. And of course, we have two businesses on that corner. So I think we just, what's happening as intended is that Route 32 is becoming a very important residential, commercial corridor. And we need to sort of look at where all that traffic is going and where it's coming from. Shivertown may become a bypass road just because with Henry W. Du Bois and the Empire State Trails doing what it's supposed to do, which is slow traffic down, people may decide they want to go a little more quickly and go up Shivertown. So I hope that the traffic study will look at all of the roads that abut 32 North. And we can have a kind of cumulative look at what that's going to look like. I noticed in one of the studies it said that a level of service, I can't remember which one it was, will degrade to a D, that delays may increase by 42 seconds in the northbound approach. So, the traffic study is identifying some of the impacts we can expect, but I think we just need to look at the whole picture because obviously these roads go places. And so we need to look at the places they're going. In terms of housing, and this is a question I don't know if you can answer, but are developments like this subject to the Fair Housing Act? I don't see any housing for people with disabilities. I see handicap parking spaces. They have 8 of them. And I don't know if there's some reason that the Fair Housing Act does not apply to these kinds of developments. But I do think, particularly if we're talking about apartments on the ground floor, it would be great if those could be set aside for people in wheelchairs or with other physical disabilities. I would like to see some 3-bedroom apartments. People just can't raise a family here anymore. And the emphasis on studios and 1-bedrooms is really, in a sense, kind of discriminatory against young families. So I'd like to see some number of 3-bedrooms, and that would help reduce the number of cars and parking spaces. If you can put 3 bedrooms in one place instead of 3 single units, we're going to reduce the number of cars. The EAF did not include the number of emergency calls that the rescue squad may be called upon to provide. So it would be good to get a written memo from them about what kind of increase they think they might see. The EAF did not include the Empire State Trail or the Walco Valley Rail Trail as one of the parks, and those are obviously going to be really important to the people in those communities. So there are just some things that were left out just as an oversight. I am trying to navigate this Unicolab. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And there's a ton of information in it. I couldn't find whether or not you had an opinion from your Environmental Conservation Commission. It may be in there and I just wasn't able to find it. But I would like to see their thoughts on, there's going to be quite a lot of tree disturbance of what's left of the trees. And the Millbrook Stream, this is in a floodplain, I believe. And I mean, I know that when my mother lived on Henry Court, the Trib 13 went halfway up her staircase. So it's a serious flood zone. And I don't know what the mitigation plan is for that, but if we suddenly have a lot, and I know there's a stormwater plan, but I don't know what kind of plan we have if we get another superstorm like Sandy or Lee. That whole corridor, we had Agway, we have garages, we have HVAC, we have a lot of commercial business, which generated, creosote, fertilizer, rat and mouse poison. All the materials were stored outside on pressure treated lumber. So I don't know if the Millbrook down there has been tested for contaminants. But if that's something, if kids are going to be back there playing in the stream, I think we should just know what the water quality is. And finally, I think Len mentioned something about, and again, I don't know what the guidelines are, but how long can you keep generating more effluent into a system that's already under a consent order? You probably know the answer to that, and I don't, but I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for your time.
Is there anyone else online here tonight to make a public comment? Okay. This looks like
I don't know if there's anyone else who didn't sign up, maybe.
I'll be quick.
want to make another one.
Many years ago, when I was sitting in your seat, I said, we need to have architectural review. The building up from Lola's, everybody's screaming about that one. Please look forward to architectural review to keep everything in the fitting and the character of our community. I don't know where you start. I have no idea, but you're in a position now. See what you can do. Speak to your father.
Well, fortunately, we have a design review board now, and they have reviewed this project already. So,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Good night.
Okay, so in that case, before we move, should we just adjourn this public hearing until next time? Do you feel like there's more to come? Yeah, so I guess the next meeting would be when?
April 15th.
So in that case, could I get a motion to adjourn the public hearing until April 15th? So. Second, all in favor? Aye. Our next public hearing is PB 2504. Can I get a motion to open the public hearing for PB 2504 32? Sorry, 81, 83 Chestnut Street.
So many.
On favor? Aye. Anyone here tonight to make a comment on 81, 83?
Don't believe I have anyone signed up. I don't know if anyone is online or that didn't sign up, but
Anyone online for 81, 83 Chestnut? Okay, in that case, I mean, I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I think we can close the public hearing.
you do, it is being reviewed by the county planning board tomorrow night. I don't know what they may or may not say. I'm just bringing that to your attention. You could always reopen it if they made any substantial comments. Yeah, so.
I don't really imagine. So,
Yeah.
Okay, I'll second it. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Well, moving on to our application review, we have 2407. One more step. Can you please come up?
Howard, do you have anyone online to speak?
Well,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, if anyone, excuse me, anyone who's online and wants to unmute yourself. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you. This is supposed to be out, so hopefully everyone calling in should also be able to hear me, but for the record, I'm still looking that way. Taylor Conwell from law firm Shelley Fader. I'm joined by Mike Bodor, Hudson Land Design, David Burke, the project architect, as well as Frank Lucioco, who is our traffic consultant for the project. As you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, we're here for our continued review, and it's we're just went through the public hearing or continued public hearing on our application. So following our March 4th discussion with you all, before the board issued a negative declaration for the project, we did provide 2 supplemental submissions to you all dated March 26th and March 28th. Those submissions work to address the initial public comments from the across the street, as well as those comments received from the Ulster County Planning Department. Notably, since that time, the DDA has also closed its public hearing, where there were no public comments. Turning first to the Ulster County public comments, and of course, we'll try and speak to some of the public comments from this evening. Pursuant to the general municipal law 239 referral requirements. And they did identify a number of comments, but generally speaking, those comments were to what state agency approvals we'd have to go through, which of course, including us, to deal with whether it's the DEC, DOT, or any of those. I think importantly, of course, the county's comments we're quoting did support the project. It does add to the housing supply and this is their quote, an excellent job of incorporating public spaces and establishing a link to the Walkfield Valley Rail Trail. So some other responses to address the county comments, again, with those specific agency actions. We did submit yesterday another letter just because we did receive a very short order turnaround from SHPO, so the State Historic Preservation Office, provided a no impact letter related to the project. So the project has no impact to archaeological or historic resources. As we noted at the March 4th meeting, again, we met with the neighbors at 152 North Chestnut, so that's directly across the north end of the site. And we did coordinate site landscaping plan with them to incorporate Green Giants among other trees and screening trees at that property. For the board's ease of review, we also did reincorporate supplemental submission related back to our March 25, 2024, our August 21, 2024, and our November 12, 2024 submission that detail our project's compliance with the special permit criteria for the project, including routes, of course, the rail trail, and also the uses that are contemplated for the commercial component of the site. So just for the benefit of the public and of course the board, some of the special permit uses, specifically the commercial uses, include a retail bakery, non-motorized bike shops, bicycle rentals, grocery store, outdoor cafe, restaurant, takeout restaurant, and indoor commercial recreation uses. Again, we submitted that those uses are consistent with and or compatible within the corridor and will help contribute to the vitality of the community.
So those are potential uses, right? We're not promising this. Just making sure
Thank you
we're clear.
for the clarification. Those are, so at the board's suggestion, we provided a list of potential tenants for the space. The same is true. We will be providing, a concept site sign plan that would be incorporated as part of your review. Just typically that happens in many instances post approval for signage, but for the benefit of this application, we'll put something together. We don't know what those tenants will be, but we're putting together that list so that it can be considered as part of your review process. With that, again, there were a number of public comments this evening, a number of which we have worked to try and address during the secret review process. But if the board sees fit, some of this we can absolutely respond to in writing will in advance of your April 15th continued public hearing. But if you'd like, we can certainly go through and try and address some of the principles. Again, we have Mr. Felicioto, so we can speak to the parking traffic study that was implemented and proposed and reviewed by the village's traffic consultant. And we can certainly go through some of the other considerations, some of which were also really directed for the village board's consideration, not so much the planning board. But I'm happy to try and go through the list if that would be.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I guess you go through your list and then if there are other things that.
Perfect. So first I'll just have, because a number of the questions were concerning, again, bike access, parking, as well as sort of the functioning of the route there, the existing traffic conditions and the speed limit. A number of recommendations. I'll have Mr. Felicioto just kind of lay out what we're implementing, how the traffic is being mitigated, and of course how the site, including our shared access with the Agway folks, really works to address what the design criteria is in your NBD district, as well as what and how it works to address what we identified in the secret negative declaration. So Frank, I'll go first to you and then I'll sort of check off some of the other components here.
Hey, Taylor, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Frank Felicioto with Labella Associates, licensed professional engineer in the state of New York. I know, the public is here tonight and they have not necessarily had the benefit of all the history here. I know the board has heard me talk through this project on many occasions. So, may sound a little duplicitous, but I think for the public benefit, it gives them an understanding of the breadth of our analysis, the work we've done to date, all the interfacing that we've had with not only DOT, but also our neighboring property. And so I'll provide a high-level summary, and then if there's further questions, I'm happy to answer them. But for the benefit of everyone in the room, we performed a very comprehensive traffic study that was consistent with many of the other projects that have been through the village and have been in front of this board. We looked at a total of 7 study intersections within the subject area, performed counts at all of those intersections, analyzed that data. As part of the analysis, we also factored 9 other pending projects within the village. And by pending, I mean projects that were under consideration at the time we conducted the study, but not necessarily projects that will all be approved or built. Some of them are at various stages, but we analyzed 9 projects as though they would be completed and built prior to this project. And that's not necessarily completely accurate at this point because we've seen some of those projects become stalled. One example is the cannabis dispensary at Mulberry. That project is no longer moving forward as far as I know. In addition to 9 distinct projects, we also included 0.5% of traffic growth annually, compounded growth. So what that's trying to do is account for additional traffic growth in the study area beyond that which could be generated by those 9 other projects and the project that we're considering. So there's a lot of conservative approaches being made in this traffic study to try to give the board and the public a comfort level that we've analyzed a worst case condition. That traffic study was reviewed by the board's and the village's own traffic consultant, Provident. And they prepared a review letter in late January, on January 28th of 2025, that ostensibly accepted the traffic study and concluded that it would not have a significant adverse impact on the surrounding roadway network. With respect to access, I think this project is one of the most unique site plans that I've been part of in terms of bringing together the neighboring property and trying to collaborate on a site access management plan that will benefit everyone. And what I mean by that is the project to our immediate south, known as the Baxter Project at 145 North Chestnut Street, and the property and this project that's before the board this evening are proposing cross-access agreement by which they would have a shared driveway on the northerly property line of the 145 property and the southerly property line of the 147 property. And that driveway would serve both properties. In that respect, you are essentially decreasing the number of potential conflict points that would be built along a state highway. So every time you have a driveway, you have the potential for a conflict between 2 drivers. With fewer access points, you have fewer conflicts. It's called a consolidation of access. It's very strongly recommended by the DOT. It's part of their best practices, and it's something that this applicant is prepared to do. Further, the Baxter property to the south of us is also proposing cross-access with the neighboring property to their south. So you have a situation where in this corridor, you have 3 continuous properties that are all providing cross-access, which is a very unique and highly beneficial access management plan for the corridor. In addition, I heard some comments about how this property is not walkable. It's not feasible for a walkable environment. I would submit as a professional with 22 years of experience that this is absolutely a walkable use. We have a direct connection to the rail trail to our west. The project is constructing a pedestrian plaza along its frontage, tying into sidewalks to the south of it. In addition, it's providing for on-street parking, which has been accepted by the DOT. And there is an allocation along the street for a future bike lane as well. So this project just within its property line is furthering a multimodal environment. And it's doing more than it can do to further that at this point. So I would submit that it is factoring multimodal access. There will be bike, ped, and transit access to and from this site. Further, in order to create the type of downtown, safe, slow environment that a use like this and the zoning certainly speaks to, this applicant took it upon itself to make a speed limit reduction request on behalf of the village and subsequently on behalf of the town of New Paltz to the DOT to reduce the speed limit in the subject area from 40 to 30 miles per hour. Again, that is an action that this applicant took upon itself to effectuate. Unfortunately, we don't have control over that decision. That is with the DOT. It's a state highway. But this applicant has taken the necessary steps to basically bring together the village and the town, get everybody on board with the idea of moving the speed limit down from 40 to 30 upon entering the village on southbound 32. So again, that's all in furtherance of trying to create a more walkable, a more complete streets environment, one that is not just dominated by personal automobiles. In addition, just some comments about shared parking analysis. Our traffic impact study included a detailed shared parking analysis. The point of a shared parking analysis, and one of the speakers hit the nail right on the head, it's the idea that a parking space can serve two uses throughout the course of the day, two or more uses throughout the course of the day. And when you think about retail and residential, these are two uses that experience very different parking behaviors. Retail tends to peak during the midday when stores are open. And people are shopping, and the residential peaks at night when people are home in their homes, sleeping, and their cars are parked. These two uses are complementary, and the data supports that the proposed number of residential units and the amount of square footage being proposed will adequately function with the number of off-street parking spaces that we are proposing. Finally, I'm just reacting to one of the comments that a member of the public asked about traffic and how much traffic is being, assigned to points north. The traffic study that we prepared assumes a 30-70 split north-south. So 70% of traffic would be destined to and from points south, so the village or connections with the thruway. And then 30% would be assigned to points north of the site. If I missed anything, I'd be happy to clarify, but I think this project touches on a lot of things that planning boards look for in terms of furthering complete streets initiatives. We're attempting to address DOT's best practices by establishing a cross-access management plan with the neighboring property. And we're establishing multimodal access along our frontage and also appealing to the state to reduce the speed limit along our frontage. So with that being said, I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, and I'll turn it back to you, Taylor.
Thank you, Brett. Did the board want any clarification on the traffic issues? I still feel like I'm not really convinced about the parking calculation, parking reductions.
Yeah, the park, I mean, I get the dual use, but the actual calculation per unit with how it's being done, that kind of, and maybe it needs to figure it out.
Yeah. Does it actually work out to less than one car per year?
I mean, you can ask Frank to explain, but there's a pretty good description of it in here that talks us through it. I understand why there are questions, but it'd be helpful to read.
Yeah.
But around that question, Frank, so I don't think, I know Mr. Taylor said so, but I don't think that, it's 146 resultant parking spots. That includes the street parking. You sure?
It does not include the street parking.
I think if you look at the site plan, actually.
Please, it's not, yeah.
146 outside
It's not
spaces,
public
11
comment.
on street, and 11 land bank that are not being.
Can I just offer some clarifications to that? We're providing 158 spaces with the 12 land-based spaces.
Right.
So we're only required with the reductions to provide 146. So we're providing 158.
So there's a question from the in the public hearing as well as from the board of whether that reduction applies, and we're trying to work through that. So whether applying the reduction gets us to a sufficient place is, I think, is the question. So there's 146 on site. The one question I had with that's quick is, are the 11 on street spaces metered, intending to be metered by the village?
That's really up to the village. And, there's got to be some, I believe when you have metering on a state highway, you need some collaboration with the DOT. It's done all the time. But this would be the first time we've heard of the idea of metering come up. I don't want to speak for the applicant, but I don't see any issues with metering. But it's not something that we as the applicant can decide.
I think one important point too you mentioned is that we are land banking the spaces. So the ability to produce those spaces comes with the site coming online and maintaining green,
Yeah, can you allow us to walk through?
Oh, yeah.
What's being asked and what we're asking? Thanks. So is there any difference in the way on-street spaces that are metered are treated in calculations like this? In other words, do they get to be baked into the required calculation if they're metered? Is there anything around your best practice that includes that consideration?
Just to be clear, we have the 146 spaces on the site, not including the 11 land banked or the 11 on street.
Yeah, we get it.
So, okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. The 11 on street spaces, if they were metered and if there was a time limit imposed on them, that time limit could essentially promote turnover in those spaces, which would be less inclined than for residential use and probably a little bit more inclined to the retail use. But that would be something that, again, the village would need to decide, and then how it was being essentially policed or enforced. You could also, meter it, but not have a time limit, or just have, a wide open time limit. It really depends on what the goal is from the on-street parking. The way we looked at it is a way to buttress some of the parking on the site, add a little bit more in an area while also providing that kind of complete streets effect. You provide on-street parking, it provides that friction between moving traffic and the curb, and works to slow things down. Think of Main Street in your downtown kind of has that feel to it, that environment. So that's what we're trying to replicate here, the benefit being some additional parking.
Can I also ask about the parking buffering of the parking to the land? No, the shrubbery or berms to limit lighting impact.
Sure. So I think, we're getting into the insights of the building too, and the landscaping plan, which are all part of the discussion. So I can certainly jump to it now, but I think importantly, the building is not, in between the rail trail and, for example, the guts, right? We're on the other side towards the street. So to the effect that there's the concern about the headlights, that is certainly understandable as far as that's the concern, right? The houses that are set back hundreds of feet from the parking lot. So we'll work for that, but we are developing a landscape plan or have developed. So it will be, I think, addressed in that aspect. I don't think a berm was to be incorporated, but there's a number of ways to address the headlight. And certainly, again, the residents are set back pretty significantly from the property line and, of course, where the parking areas will be on the site.
One more quick question I wanted to ask, please, about the divided by 1.2 aspect of the parking calculation, because that's really what brings it down from what would be the absolute ceiling to what is now the arrived at conclusion. Has there been any change to that 1.2 division with the introduction of remote work and hybrid work for residents of buildings like this?
That's straight from our code. So that's 1.2 is if it's, excuse me, residential and retail. If it's residential and office, it's a 1.4 division. But the code, that would be something the village board would have to change the code if you wanted to, present that
What I'm
change.
asking is that still valid with the degree to which people work? Not asking you, Mike.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Has to be now some third of workers. It's at least a third of workers certain days of the week. So Frank, do you still think that codes that include that 1.2 division is still valid with the amount of remote and hybrid work that happens these days?
I do, yeah. I think when you look at the data from the ITE, which is included in our traffic study, there's some data in the appendix that I'll just draw your attention to. But essentially, you have almost when you look at retail versus residential, they're almost so complementary that you have retail peaking when residential is at its lowest. So even if you were to allow for an extra 10 or 20% for work from home, I think you'd still be okay on the shared parking analysis. I think that's a moving target too. It's something that, I mean, I've heard anecdotally that things are starting to level out, and certain companies are now requiring people to go back. So I think we'll never be able to hit it perfectly on the nose. But I think the 20% from the code tries to provide the benefits of shared parking, give some of that back to green landscape, automobile space, while still acknowledging that parking is important and that it's something that needs to be considered. I think the code's pretty close to being spot on, and in 5 years it could be a different scenario. So I think the village has to kind of keep an eye on it. But where we stand now, I think it's adequate.
Thank you. And this is a board that had this conversation about not wanting to overbuild parking in any situation. So I understand why that piece of the code exists. I understand why these calculations were done, and I feel pretty comfortable with the total amount. If there's any other question, sorry. Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that the further reduction of 1.2, it says the planning board may consider, so it's really at your discretion to decide if that's appropriate. And I also wanted to ask, just to make sure we have it right. So I'm looking at what I think is the latest plan, and it says 158 spaces, including 12 land banked. And that does not include the on-street spaces. Am I understanding that correctly? It does include it?
Oh, you're correct that it doesn't.
Did you say 158 or 168?
158.
Okay, 158.
Frank had said before it was 158 plus the on-street spaces. If that's the case, we're getting pretty close to the 175 that is calculated. So
yeah, I would in this, if your traffic study is correct relative to the plan that you're referring to, the reduced parking requirement of the project would be the 168, which would be the total maximum parking requirement based on the number of residential units and the 500 feet per spot requirement of the professional retail.
what are you looking at? I'm sorry.
The traffic study that they submitted.
I wonder if that goes with the most updated plan, because the most updated plan shows 175 spaces required before you do the reduction. We might need some more information on this.
I think we need them to drive.
Yeah.
And certainly note that we did go extensively through this during the secret process. We'll certainly address it because it's
Yeah.
been brought up again. The code enforcement officer will look at it and make that.
We go through a lot of things
Yeah.
extensively in a secret process, doesn't mean that we don't get to discuss them again during.
That's why we'll bring it to the code enforcement officer. So we'll make sure that Mike and Frank align the plans with the numbers.
But the board needs to talk about it too, because
Right,
whether,
wait,
yeah,
right. And again, what I mentioned, Mr. Soto before, with the part of the land bank parking, it's not that those spaces wouldn't be built if it's not that we can't provide them. It's that we've worked with the board to, again, green up the space because the reporting is, and I'm just mentioning to the public that these spaces are not being constructed, but would have to be constructed if there was a determined need for the project. So it's not that we're not providing them, it's just that we're not providing them now, with the benefit of the village's consultant and our consultant expressing that they're not necessary because of the shared parking. With that, I would shift then to Bodendorf, who just talks through the engineering. There were questions about water, sewer, and infrastructure usage, as well as snow removal. Then we can also speak to the village's environmental consultant, who also has made comments on this application that we've also prepared to talk about in the process.
If I may, before you go, sorry, before we lose Frank's attention, there was a question around exiting the property. And the one thing that we see a lot in the neighborhood was brought up by the person who spoke about it in the public hearing is the challenge of left turn exits from onto busy streets. And how many of those left turn exits have been limited up and down Main Street. And as Route 32 continues to increase in its volume, whether it may be an inconvenience, in fact, but there is the question as to whether left turn exits would be challenging out of the property and whether that's considered in any of the study data. I don't see it.
We did factor for left turn exits out of the property. The level of service coming out of our project is level of service C, which is considered an acceptable level of service. Of course, there's times when traffic is very busy. People might need to wait a few seconds longer, but when you do an analysis with the level of conservativeness that we included, level of C is considered acceptable. That means people are waiting on average about 20 to 35 seconds during the peak hour, not the whole day, just the worst case peak hours. And that's considered an acceptable operating level. I heard this reminds me about the comment about the traffic signal. Unfortunately, in order to put in a traffic signal, you have to warrant it. There's a long list of requirements that need to be met before the state would consider putting in a traffic signal. Any one of these projects on its own would not warrant a traffic signal. Even though when you look at it, you say it's a big development, but you have to have sustained traffic of a certain level throughout the course of the day. And these types of projects just don't get you there. And then when you look at the analysis and you see the resulting levels of service, we're able to function adequately without traffic signals at our front door. And again, this was reviewed by DOT. They have jurisdiction over the access. And then when you consider the cross access that we're providing, limiting the number of conflict points on the state highway will also make those turning maneuvers, facilitate those turning maneuvers rather than having driveways all over the place and people competing for the same gaps in traffic.
Thank you.
And the negative declaration also notes that your village consultant reviewed the site distance as well and noted explicitly that there's an acceptable site distance looking in both directions of the site intersection. So they looked at that too from a site distance. So we actually moved some of the landscaping and some of the frontage based on the board's comments related to that.
Thanks.
And Mike, infrastructure.
Yeah, so, obviously, water and sewer, all new water and sewer infrastructure is being constructed for this project. I think the concerns with sewer, in the consent order are related to wet weather flows is what we call them. When you have infiltration and inflow into your sewer, that's coming from other properties. This property is going to be completely separate, no stormwater going into the sewer system. So there'll be no added I&I, which is what the acronym is for inflow and infiltration. You know, there's been no mention to me from Blue, as far as capacity issues. You know, we are helping, with the improvements to the pump station and any infrastructure that might, go along with that. The village is currently constructing a new water main that will go along the frontage to this site, so water capacity is not an issue as well. There's other things we could do since we are pumping to the sewer system. We could time delay when our pump station pumps, if that is something that the sewer department would want us to do. We're still working with the sewer department on all those details and the village engineer. So we'll get to the goal line on what the best solution is for all.
And similar to Agway and Zero Place, to the extent they had a developers agreement, the same will be true here of the contribution to those upgrades. So this project will contribute based on effectively a share of that addition to those improvements.
If I may address, so you're gonna be pumping your wastewater into our municipal system. Correct. You just stated you could time that, you know, maybe so you don't do it right at 5 o'clock at night, right? You know, everybody's taking a shower or whatever. I brought this up before, I'll bring it up again, not to this applicant, but since our problem is during the times of heavy rain, that's when we have the biggest problem with our sewer system. Can you also put a rain sensor on there? So if you're trying to go off at midnight, which is when sewer flows are very low, but it's raining cats and dogs, don't do it. Those things exist. We all have them on sprinkler systems that are residential. I mean, they're simple. Please look into it. Sure. So whatever your timing says, if it's pouring, don't do it. Controls have gotten very advanced and we can add it when we want to these days. Great. Let's do that. Moving on to stormwater, there was some concerns about runoff along 32. We're adding 3 catch basins along our frontage to catch road runoff, any runoff that may come off our site, but probably isn't because we're collecting those in our bioretention areas frontage. We're bypassing runoff that comes from the DOT system onto the site, around the site, and back to the trip to the team. As far as on-site treatment, oil water separation, we're going several steps above just oil water separators. We have pre-treatment devices, pre-treatment built into our underground detention system, pre-treatment built into our bioretention system that's within the courtyard, and then those bioswales in the front all have pre-treatment built into them. And the filtration in these systems and the sand filter that's in our underground detention system remove much more hydrocarbons than just a simple oil water separator. So it's much more advanced than those types of systems. Plus, all of our catch basins have deep sumps, so any sediment that might be in the stormwater system being conveyed gets tracked by those as well. So when you're maintaining that stormwater system, it's not only the treatment systems that you have to maintain, but you have to go around and back out those catch basins, you know, periodically throughout the year as they fill up with sediment. Snow removal, I believe the snow removal on the front plaza and the sidewalk will be handled by the building manager for this. So flooding. So we are in the floodplain, but we are not. What's important to realize, we're not in the floodway. The floodway is the area tied to the wall hill that you don't want to put any obstructions in. No fill, no structures of any kind. That's hundreds of feet towards the river. We're just in the floodplain. So as long as you don't fill the floodway, there's no mitigation required. You're not making floodplain. And this is an enormous floodplain. So adding structures to this site, you're not gonna see any.
There was a county comment about the elevation, so maybe you could speak to that.
Sure. Yeah, so we, typically, the flood elevation on the site is 189. Our lowest point on the site is 190. Our building is at 191.5. So everything on the site where people can be is gonna be above that flood elevation. So even during a flood, it's not gonna be flooded.
And that was guidance, that was additional guidance outside of what was the standard review, but so the county gave you additional material to look at, and we did put that in response, board and Mike. I actually did now, he actually memorized that, perfectly, so I don't need to clarify those numbers, so very impressive.
So we did the standard that the county was.
Yes.
That's what.
You accounted for it in your negative declaration too, related to the flood issues that the board considered. If there are specific infrastructure questions, I would turn to David, put up the architecture of the project to talk more about the community character, how it was designed, why it was done this way, and how it relates with Agway and the other projects coming online, and of course.
Zach, before you move on, I just counted the spaces on the recent site plan. Admittedly, I didn't count space by space. I totaled what's in the circles. But unless I'm missing something, I come up with 146 regular spaces, 11 on street, and 9 land banked is what I count. Perhaps I'm missing something, but those are the numbers that match the recent. Yeah.
One comment, in terms of the swales and management of the, water, the INI or whatever you want to call it. Those things function only insofar as they are maintained. And so I would want to make sure there was some guarantee of their continued maintenance. I think it's twice a year that you're required to inspect and a rain garden or that sort of thing. And then just 2 observations just from having gone by the property. It looks almost like there are 2 ponds on it whenever it rains. And it seems to me like you're saying it's not in the floodplain, but those are definitely wetlands. And I always have a problem with the maps because it seems like I can never get a developer to make a map that shows both the building and the wetland on the same map. So you can actually see what the pre-existing condition is and how you are planning to redirect the water. And so I would like to see something like that. And then I just lost my internet connection and can't seem to get it back, but I still can't find where you identified the trees that you're going to be planting. I see lots of tree pictures on there, but I did not see unless does it exist now? It wasn't the last time I looked at it. It wasn't. I couldn't see it because it wasn't there. But I would like to have the trees identified, and then.
Do you mean the landscape plan that will show all the landscaping, or just?
Yes. They have that on there. They have the symbols for trees, but there's no usually there's a key. So this is this type of tree, this is that.
Oh,
Yeah.
That certainly will be provided.
Okay, so.
And just to touch on your stormwater patterns, the stormwater pollution prevention plan covers all of that, like pre-existing conditions, post conditions, how these things function on site. And just to touch on the wetlands, we are working with the DEC now on offsite wetlands that might be on BOCES, which will be shown.
And that's a direct response to the environmental consultant's comments that we needed to pursue jurisdictional determination due to the change in the DEC's regulations from earlier this year. So we've been out there, DEC's actually walked the site once.
Yeah, I think it's actually that, well, we're supposed to go there this afternoon.
And the DEC actually had to come out to the site because when Agway began its development, they had to come out and give authorization to Agway to do the shared driveway because that is in effectively one of the wetland areas for them to construct that driveway. So DEC came out and issued that approval for them to build that, do that construction.
Well, there's silt fences to appear to be holding up as well as to the, and, you know, I took pictures of it and I'm not sure. I didn't get any follow-up from the building department, but it's they need to be maintained, and every time that it snows, I mean, it looked like the silt fence was actually down in one spot. I'm waiting for some follow-up on that.
Yeah, that's not, we're not building out,
Right.
that's right, that's actually, we're sharing that. Going forward, but understood.
All right, so let me walk you through the plan and give you all kind of a background on how this building was developed and how it integrates to the surrounding environment. You can see that the first floor plan that I'm showing here shows the landscape and the plaza and the residence courtyard in the back. The idea behind the building is the kind of two L's, if you will, two bar buildings, kind of rotated away from one another to kind of create this landscape courtyard in the back. This is not just an amenity for people who live there, it's also a stormwater catchment area. The idea is to really keep the rainwater that falls on the site instead of putting it out into the local waterways. And so that courtyard in the interior is really about retaining the stormwater runoff and letting it infiltrate into the ground. And it also opens up because we want to kind of propagate landscape to connect with the existing wooded area in the back. All right, so we're really trying to bring kind of a health and wellness destination in the development of this building, and have it benefit the residents that live there. The other thing the planning approach does is it actually creates a public plaza to the street side. Instead of pushing the building right up against the street, we opted to let it sit back and breathe a little, create a destination for the pedestrian. And that is really, a place where we could have tables and chairs for, a bar restaurant scenario. You could just have a nice landscape area to wait while people did their shopping. So we wanted to kind of let the area, again, make a public place, a destination, if you will, at this building, rather than just simply a pedestrian highway sidewalk that runs right by it.
Could you speak to the accessibility? Because I think I was mistakenly told the board that you needed a special use permit for those first floor units, but if they're
all accessible,
right?
They're all
then you
ADA
don't.
accessible, so
yeah.
anybody in a wheelchair will be able to use all of them. And access every part of those units.
And everything from the parking lot into the building.
From anywhere in the building, you can wheel into that building and including the retail.
Thank you.
And
And outside of it.
Yeah. Any questions on the planning?
Well, I think it would be good to discuss the mix of studios and bedrooms to create like the rationale there. Yeah, logic there.
So the mix, we have right now 23 studio apartments. We have 72 one bedroom and 33 two bedroom. So a total of 128 units. I can't speak for the applicant, but the mix was established early in the design. We can look at increasing the 3 bedrooms. We heard you loud and clear. They address more of a family oriented development, and we could certainly look at combining units to increase that number of 2 bedrooms and add 3 bedrooms.
Is there like market potential research that you'll do to create the distribution you have currently?
Typically, there's a lot that goes into it, right? The 3 bedrooms typically generate more school children. Oftentimes that can also relate to parking. So it's actually, I think it's, like Frank can speak for more specifics, but yes, it's usually a market analysis based on the needs. There's a lot of mentions in the comprehensive plan, and of course, from the public tonight about creating the additional density. When you add the 3 bedroom, you're taking up more space to potentially have another family versus just having one larger family. But again, it's a consideration. Those units typically are more than expensive, and also typically harder to then more difficult to afford. So there's a combination of those factors that go into it, especially where there is a set aside or, below market rate or affordable component to a project. That also, sort of factors into how you can make, I guess, so to speak, the numbers work, for the construction and planning. So yes, I don't have that. We'll speak to the applicant to be more specific, but we'll absolutely look at the diversity of the units to the extent there's, something that could be adjusted there. If it would work.
It would also be useful to look at the school district. I know that there has been significant decline in our elementary school population. And I'd just like to hear your analysis on how you would figure out it.
Yeah, typically you would look at it when the school, this would actually to the extent this generates school children, it wouldn't, create a new demand or increase that demand on the school systems because of the existing vacancy or lack of new students in the district. So typically this is a net positive when you add a tax base and sort of the other tax components of it versus its current standing, but we can certainly provide data to the extent it's available.
Have you given us an affordable housing plan yet, or is that still to come? As far as what mix of units would be affordable?
No.
Okay. That's something that we'll need.
Yeah, once it's right.
Yeah.
Established that. Yep.
Right. Yeah, and just so the public understands, we put in the approval resolution what that affordable mix is, and that's something the village can enforce over time. So like Zero Place has that in their
It's a really good
approval.
point.
It's something, it's not just a hope, it's required.
Right. There was a mention tonight about how there is a consideration about where, I don't know what, that's another developer, I'm not sure what they're planning to do, whether it is condo, residential, or otherwise. You can't just switch a building. I mean, in development world, you can't really just switch a residential rental building to a condo. It's not a thing. It's a lot of work because of the ownership and management. But either way, it's Emily's point, the most important point, that by switching it from rental to ownership, you wouldn't then be able to get out of, so to speak, a affordable or one type of affordable housing law. It would still be applicable, and then that would control how much they could even sell those units for. So those would be affordable sale units versus affordable rental units. Both things are highly, I think, sought after because they don't really exist, and that's the purpose of creating these laws, is to encourage both. So again, I don't know it'll be as straightforward, and I won't speak to their application, but this is being presented as a, and it would condition in the approval that those any units that are affordable would remain that, regardless of for sale or rental. But this is a rental.
For the board's information, with the current 128 units, it would require 20 affordable housing units. And the waiting list as of last fall on the Affordable Housing Board, Terry can tell me if it's changed, but was 70% one person, 25% two person, and 5% 3 or greater. So the bulk of people that are on the list are one person units. So.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the main thing that's making me hesitant to ask for more 2 and 3 bedroom units. I just, based on the data that we have, I don't know if that's really.
But that data is specific to affordable, not necessarily.
Right.
Just community.
Market demand is certainly a higher rent, but three bedroom, you would make more money as a developer doing it that way.
I don't have a position on it, but I'm just making sure we understand it. But Mike cited was the affordable housing waiting list, not what the
Correct.
across the community. All housing.
I'm thinking more in terms of the eventual equilibrium state when this has an effect on the rental market in the village and some of the houses get converted into single family houses.
That's a fact for sure.
There certainly is a supply demand component, right? When there is less supply and there's the demand as there currently is, the prices are certainly increased. So providing, again, that's how it's supposed to work. But obviously we know that opinion is certainly just that. But we will look at that and make sure we can address it further than we have.
I did want to just mention one other thing, just to kind of support what Frank said earlier on the shared driveway. We had previously programmed a driveway just in here. That came in within our site, right? Which came in quite close to the building. With a shared driveway, we've reduced the driveway from 2 to 1, and then we've actually increased the public space on the south side. So that entrance driveway actually enters in to the property to the south, and then past that it's turned to the north. So we've benefited, this property, in my opinion, has benefited by increased public space and landscaping plaza for the development.
We've also incorporated a lighting plan, but there was a comment tonight about rooftop lighting, so we will, I think, adjust that to make sure that's flushed out further than it is to the extent it's not, but we'll make sure that that also, again, addresses and certainly respects the neighborhood as well. We know that was a probably busy conversation for the board for Zero Place initially, and I think project of everything, so we'll address that. We'll add that lighting component to the one.
And this is lighting that would be on at night.
Yeah, typically these are not open, the roof decks, I don't know, it depends on the rules for the buildings and what the hours are. But yes, I mean, intent of bringing to bring the lighting down, not out, projector off the building. It's not security lighting, it's really just lighting for the space. But my question is speak, safety effectively, but the idea is not projecting out towards off the site.
It disrupts the navigation capabilities of pollinators at night and fireflies when they're in season.
Yeah, we just took my son out for big night. We had a couple of Nova Westchester, so we had one early one, and then that was it. We got a couple redback salamanders, but it was so let's hear it.
Any other architectural questions or comments?
And it's confirmed, this has been before the architecture review board at this point, or?
It has. And their response letter is in the file.
I don't think I have any other questions from public hearings. Anything else from the board?
Well, generally, I feel like the applicant has been in front of me for a long time. Like, what is the next step?
Well, the next step would be that this board would close the public hearing at some point, finish the review based on the public's comments and everything that's been presented. They would need to get subdivision approval and site plan and special use permit approval at this point. The April 8th meeting is the public hearing? No, public hearing is closed, right? Yeah, public hearing is closed. April 8th will likely be the decision by the zoning board for the 2 side yard setbacks.
Maybe I'm missing something, but Rachel was asking about the landscaping plan. Have we already seen that? If I have, it's my fault. Is that already been in that?
So we have preliminary,
We have a preliminary landscape plan that you have seen.
Okay.
we were, so a lot of times the landscaping is the last sort of piece, because the building can shift, the parking, so now we can put that into what Rachel's looking for, which is, hey, this tree is here, this is how many, and then has a plant list and species lists that are all associated with that, and that will also relate to what type of trees help with the water, and or mitigation or screening. So, yes.
Can I ask that when we get to the point of approving the site plan and the subdivision, can we get a set of plans that has all of it on paper?
They've been supplying it all along, and yeah.
So that we can have it before we vote, so we can see all the different pages and all the different, how many oak trees you're gonna plant.
Yep.
How big is a sewer pipe and all that detail.
And if comments come out of that meeting, even then, those can be conditions of approval to the extent there are other trees or other things that needed to be added or changed or dusted. Those can also be addressed, but we'll make sure you get a full set of the final plan. So when the questions about the number of spaces, there's no ambiguity, no question about how many are on site, how many are off on the street, how many are land bank, and why that, satisfies the, we'll make sure that that's fully be involved in it.
And Mike, have we heard anything from the state about reducing the speed?
No, we haven't, and just based on their track record, it's not surprising that we haven't. So,
There's no one.
no. They work at their pace and their review.
For your benefit, we'll ask our traffic consultants on, we'll ask that he follows Mr. Tinney and others, just to see, to the extent those that attended the county, gave meetings and whatnot, to see where they might be in that process.
And I appreciate that. However, I think if this project opens and that speed limit is still 40 miles an hour, we are going to be in a world of hurt. So, see the mayor here. Can you convey to, can you convey to our state delegation that this has to happen? The Commissioner of Transportation can sit around all he or she wants and say, well, you know, it takes a long time. You have the ability to put the political pressure. The applicant, they won't listen to you, trust me, but they will listen to you.
And
you can't give up, you can't give in, you have to make this happen.
If I may, and excellent points, I believe the village and town have both.
We submitted a joint resolution to the process, including pictures and but yeah, so, but we don't have an answer.
All of them, many times. And the only time you get attention is when you push.
Understood.
It's time to push.
We have been pushing for many traffic changes for quite a while. We have submitted everything, including petitions from the community. We will continue to push. I cannot promise they will do anything because I have zero control over them. But I can tell you that we will continue to push.
We'll see what the applicant can do. I know it's a heavy burden, but.
And in case anybody doesn't know, my name is Sona Weisberg. I'm trustee of the village.
I will also reach out to the county and see if they can help us move the decision along quicker.
And I think optimization of the signal south of the project is not exactly equally as important, but as long as we're pushing, let's push it as a package.
Yeah.
But to Terry's question about what else we still need, I think, can I touch on?
Yeah, I was gonna say before we wrap this up,
Yeah.
there were a few things that I want to just go through, make sure that, so, yeah, please.
Sure. So some of them we already talked about tonight. We're gonna need a sign plan, a final landscaping plan, those things. And an affordable housing plan, like what the mix of units is, because that's, something the board needs to look at. The board will need to make a decision about the payment in lieu of parkland. You have to go through the factors and make that decision. You're not asking for any waiver on that or anything, right?
We haven't made any
Right.
requests. I know in
So-
certain instances, sometimes the connections to trails or other plazas can be considered, but.
We've been through that. It hasn't been too
Right.
persuasive, so just let you let's see. The rail trail connection, you do need the village board's approval on, so are you all set with that?
And the Wallkill Valley Land Trust as well.
So, yeah, there were certain points that we were still questioning whether we were doing our own, working with Agway or otherwise, but it seems to be as it stands.
And Emily, I did offer to supply the language from the other two projects for the agreements, which will probably be boilerplate, so.
So yeah, we'll need a developer's agreement,
Yeah.
a stormwater maintenance agreement, access agreement, things like that, so we can.
Yeah, we've developed the access agreement with folks at Agway. There have been some changes just related to the grading or something to that effect, but that's already been, that's been taken upon.
So there are certainly other design factors for the board still to consider, but as far as just the things we need to check off.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that's all for tonight, unless there are any other final questions from the board. Right, if not, we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, tax.
Oh, it's no more IRS.
Really? I just.
We were one of the community. We were one
Or I'll send you those agreements tomorrow. I got tied up this afternoon, so I'll get them to you.
Just kidding. Yeah. No, I don't. No.
Next, we have PB 2504 8183 North Chestnut. Let's see, so we received some, your updated plans and innovations. And your project has been referred to the Ulster County Planning Board, but we've not received response yet. If you have physical copies, would you mind spreading them out here so we can
Zach, I could put anything you'd like up on the screen as well, if you want.
Some options for colors on the fence. If that was it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And I started from this on there. Yeah.
Black is a lot.
Very important.
Yeah. And Christine, you're committed to keeping the,
Yeah, I'm looking at financing a $20,000 HP machine. Yeah. Or something. It's great. Right, yeah. It's a whole thing, yeah. The tree, it's a tree. There's a baseball field.
Yeah. The kids love it.
So,
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, so we updated the language on the map to match the NBR. Because previously it was whatever whole district was on it, so.
I see. And were there any changes to like parking or?
Yeah, and that, I spoke to the landlord and he agreed to this summer to redraw the lines and move one of the handicap spots from, both the handicap spots were in front of the restaurant, which you guys make a point that would make more sense to have one in front of this office, which makes sense. And he's totally fine to do that this summer.
Zach, I went to the site and verified the last drawing that was presented is accurate. There's a number of the spaces were shown originally as 90 degrees straight in, and a number of them are angled. And so he drew the drawing correctly for the last iteration.
Okay. Yeah. Sidewalk is in front of the planters here, right by the graph. Yeah. Well, I guess we should talk about.
Recording in progress.
Yes.
Yep, sorry about that.
Yeah. So I think the site plan looks good to me. I don't have any questions about the site plan now. We want to talk about the this elevation here and screening, landscaping.
I tested out how small we can make with the height of those, and 4.5 feet is really it. Like otherwise, it doesn't provide any seated privacy, and then it just wouldn't give it. So like 4.5 feet is like my height seated. It's all the person. But like 4 feet, it would not help anybody. You're just sitting on the road.
I think the color change makes a difference.
Yeah, I think I prefer the wood color to the pink personally.
Me too.
Yeah. Feels like it's a little.
Maybe easier to make. What about the benches on the hill between the parking lot and the rail trail?
Those are pretty decrepit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would get rid of them to start and then really think about it. I don't know how that integrates with service for us. So,
It's a good place to sit. I mean,
right.
it's nicer than sitting by the street.
Right. I don't know what impact it has for us if we put seating out there that we're not planning to serve on. Is that anything to do with you guys? I think that cleared with the new site plan, to put some tables.
It's already there. The table and the benches are already there. They're just decrepit.
But all of the seating is already there.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. I don't think we need to approve you like putting a new bench there or not putting a bench there, but it's your decision. All right, so I mean, is the board in agreement about this color versus the pink? Are there any other?
I think if it were that natural wood, if it were cedar, it would sort of wear and fade nice and kind of have that sort of gray wood cedar look would be quite nice.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's gonna need to be cleaned continuously, being on 32. We cover much darker because of the concept. Yeah. But I think that the natural would be different.
Yeah, I have a preference for natural persons. I think.
Do you plan to, I'm not being facetious, but do you plan to like refurb the cone, like put a new paint job on it? Cause it's pretty.
I don't know. I could ask, I have a deposit for somebody to paint the building. I could ask them what they would want to do.
It's like a mesh, the cone.
The cone is mesh, yeah.
It's pretty warm. It would look quite nice if it freshened up.
Yeah.
The whole thing I think looks great.
Spray paint.
But yeah,
Right.
take paint on that.
Chocolate swirl. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I didn't want that to be
Yeah.
our thing, that we took the cone down.
Do you think it'll bring kids?
Yeah.
I want to go.
No, it's the first thing anybody brings up with me about it, so. Yeah. The wife of the guy that made the phone reached out to us and said we were taking it down and she wanted it back. So, yeah, they were just handing it to them.
Is there anything about traffic flow that we have to discuss?
No, because there's no changes to the, we confirmed that what was drawn on the plans as changes was done with the previous site plan. And that's what I was saying when I went to the site and checked the spaces. I also checked the ingress and egress, and it matched what the plan is. So as long as all the elements that are on the existing site plan that was approved and signed, along with the note, and what I recommended, since they drew their own site plan, is they made a reference to the original signature that's on the existing site plan about the sidewalk. I don't know, Emily, if that satisfies your, yeah. So I think you have everything you need. They went to the DRB and actually got nice responses from them. They've addressed the parking, they've addressed the lighting and the landscaping. You could potentially authorize Emily to write a decision, and if anything came out from the county, you could always amend it on site.
That's what I was gonna suggest. Yeah, I have a motion authorizing to write the resolution of approval pending the county response.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. So, yeah, we will see you next time, hopefully we'll. Next we have PB 2507 52 North Justin Street.
No, you skipped one, 2506.
Oh. Sorry.
I have them back.
Oh,
Sorry.
my fault. 2506, 14 Lincoln Place.
Thanks for your patience. It's been on today.
Mike, you want to have it on the screen if they want?
I can if you want, but if you've got printed copies, it's probably just as easy for them to look at.
Give us a little.
Yes, so the property, 14 Lincoln Place. We went back to the drawing board, after speaking with the zoning board. Getting a 4th bedroom, and they gave their reasons why they wouldn't approve, so. That we scaled down the size of the home and just added the 3 bedrooms. It's currently a 2-bedroom.
What's the result of square footage of the three bedroom?
1,092.
1098?
Yeah.
The original proposal was 2670 and it's down to 1093.
Yeah. Well, no, the extension, the original, yeah,
What's the total square foot?
just under 22, I believe. Yeah, just under 22.
So basically
The original-
doubles.
Yeah, doubles the size of the home.
It goes from 1,100 to 2,300 square feet.
Well, you also removed the porch as well, the covered porch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how many bathrooms are there?
3. There's no bathroom downstairs. On the first floor. There's only 1 bathroom upstairs. So we have the bathroom downstairs. And the bathrooms upstairs.
Okay.
We have to change the front porch, a porch.
I see.
Okay. It's nicer for them, but.
Yeah.
Give them some coverage.
Is there a bulk table in there? One of the
Yeah, I couldn't find the square footage.
So.
I think
Yeah, it's on there. It's on there. It's on, it's actually on the very first page. In the bottom right. Total square footage.
it's a lot of coverage, but not the buildings.
No, it says 2403 square feet.
Yes.
No, I don't think it.
Residential does not. Plus, yeah, plus this is in a residential district, so.
Yeah, that's because yeah.
There's a note here about, full-size plans. Did you?
Yeah, it's up to the village, but I thought that this small plan wasn't, normally we want a whole plan for a site plan, right?
For site plan, Alex is accepting these now, they're smaller because to be honest, he needs the bigger plans for construction plans, but when we get the bigger plans for site plans, we are running out of room for storage. So the smaller plans for site plan work just fine for us. These are a perfect size.
Something along the people that we've done. We could look at the houses around neighborhoods.
Yeah, the one to the left.
Do the same thing.
Yeah.
We're under
Okay, well, I think we can set a public hearing for this. Could I get a motion to set the public hearing before April 15th? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And unless there are any other.
We should probably classify it for seeker. Did we already? Initially? I don't remember if we did or did.
All in favor? Okay, so that's all. We will see you next time for the public hearing.
Gary, I will email you by the end of this week. Yes, please. The list of letters to send out because they won't be for that date. They're gonna have to be out by this Saturday. So I'll get them to you tomorrow, Thursday at the latest.
Yes.
We are- Good evening. Another. I'm John Bennett, the town law architecture in town, and representing our clients, Taylor Miller and Jeffrey Cadino. This little porch, project on Chestnut Street, 52 North Chestnut. There's an existing brick stoop, on the front side of the house that we're replacing with a new porch, which is with a cover. And the Victorian style, the matching style of the house. We're not obliged to present this to the HPC, but we did anyway, just for the feedback and let them know. We're doing it, like you guys did this similarly with the Legacy project. So their response was, this I think was in your folders, but so the porch plans at 52 North Chestnut Street impressed everyone. And we all found it a very thoughtful and beautiful design that will enhance not only the building, but the streetscape as well. So that's nice and I feel good about it. Let's see what we're doing. Here it is. Sorry. So you can see the removals plan, basically the stoop is a little bit smaller than the proposed porch. As I said, stairs to come down to a beach stone sidewalk that runs up to the public sidewalk. There's also a small, small sidewalk to the side that goes to the gravel drive. And these are sort of the construction plans. You can see the it has two columns and a new centered right and bias side stair down the middle, keeping that Victorian style. And there's an existing. Well, let's sort of sit back to it. So the setbacks in the zone are 0 to 15. So well, that of course we are increasing the side a little bit. Obviously, and so the edge of the new porch would be a little bit closer to the adjacent property on one side. But we're looking at that setback. And on the front side, the setback only requires that space is left for the public sidewalk. So we're just
actually extending the stairwell where it is now. Removing one of the existing stone, new stone sidewalk pieces to accommodate that, and just running it. We're gonna reset them and make more of that. Nicer and run right to the existing side. Just recycling. The pieces we're making, or that we're utilizing for the design are mostly selected from online catalogs, which is kind of the way these buildings are done in the Victorian time. Not blind, of course, but through catalogs and parts that were prefabricated. So we went through a nice process with the owners, became different crown moldings and bouncers and all the different components, picking pieces and toward to the house. Not kind of overdoing it and sort of starting with more dramatic kind of design and paired it down would be sort of in keeping with the home itself. The exception to that, and so here you can see some of the components here. The exception to that is the pediment design. So inside the house, there's an existing banister, the base of the stair has this really kind of unique flower patterns with big photos and neighbors things like that. The owners love that. And they wanted to utilize that design. We looked at some other, designs and inspiration, and there was some that had this kind of radial pattern to them. We were exploring ideas like that. And she said, "Wow, I really like this, it's just only make that work." So let's the process kind of explore that, came over the way that can work. So we have some now. The colors here are just placeholders and just kind of fun colors that were selected as we're just discussing what it might look like and doing some sketches. And so, again, we're not really sure what the colors will be actually yet, but basically these will be cut out probably using like a laser or CNC machine, and they'll be kind of bringing that little detail that inside the house to the outside and sharing it with everybody on the street. So we're really excited about the thing it's going to create. So using a lot of standard pieces and a few custom pieces to try to keep the house. That's basically
That feature will be a wood trim.
yeah, it would be wood. Well, that's what we're thinking now. I mean, it could possibly be like an AZEK, but I think it's any questions?
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, the guy was right. A lot of the buildings are ugly, so it's nice to see something. Sorry.
I think what we're so excited about is just that it doesn't need to happen, right? It's there, it's not falling apart.
Right.
It's a little beat up, but the fact that we're putting the effort to do this and to make it right and get us involved and try to really make it something nice, I think it just looks.
Well, I think there are a few things we can do tonight, at least. I can get a motion to put this as a seeker take two action. Second, all in favor?
Clarify that one thing around code. Is it the fact that this is more than 100 square feet that we're looking at it? Is that?
It's a change to a site plan, and there is no approved site plan for this property. So it is a fairly minor change, but because there's no approved site plan, in order to issue the building permit, it has to come to this board. You could, though, if you chose to do similar, is authorize Emily to write the decision for next meeting. Yeah, sorry. Apologies.
But could I also get a motion to set the public hearing for April 15th? All in favor? Second. Aye. And could we get a motion authorizing our attorney to draft a resolution?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And could I also get a motion adjourning the meeting?
Yes.
Second.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
It's good to see you.